This episode of the BeanCast is brought to you by Content Marketing World, the world's premier content marketing event. Find out more at contentmarketingworld.com today. Use the offer code BeanCast. Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 543, Breaking Up Facebook. For Monday, May 13th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob North. Thanks for joining us. More and more people are calling for the breakup of Facebook. Everyone from politicians to one of their own co-founders have been making cases. But will splitting the company up truly spawn competition and solve the problems? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, getting our terms right on influencer marketing. What's blocking addressable ad adoption? Whether corporate accelerators still make sense. Plus this week's Ad Fail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the editor of Ad Pulp and creative consultant at Bonehook, Mr. David Byrne. Hi, David.
Hi, Bob. Thank you so much. Great to be here again.
Now, also with us, we have the VP of Strategic Sales at Jump Shot, Mr. Eli Goodman. Hi, Eli. I almost screwed it up.
Bob, thanks for the smooth introduction. Good to be back.
And next, he's the president of Spark Media Solutions, author, speaker, podcaster, Mr. David Spark. Boy, I even screwed up Spark. Boy, I gotta work this out already. How you doing, David?
You are not the first one, nor will you be the last, and I will not hold you to it. Don't sweat it.
Thank you. And finally, we have the Chief Engagement Officer and Managing Director at Cult Collective. Say hello to our old friend, Mr. Mark Whitehead. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Bob. Great to be back. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Well, we've got a big topic to lead off with this week. It's something that's been generating a lot of press. Facebook co-founder Chris Hughes caused a complete stir this week when he argued in the New York Times that Facebook has concentrated too much power over public discourse and influence into one place and should be broken up into smaller companies. Now, Eli, I know that this opinion is pretty popular right now and that Hughes makes a lot of good points, but I've got to ask honestly, because I'm a little bit skeptical, not entirely, but a little bit skeptical here. Is breaking up the band really the best way to solve all our problems with Facebook? What's your thoughts on that?
I do not believe that breaking up this band would be the best solution. Let me break it into a couple parts. I mean, this certainly, like anybody, I had a lot of opinions about not only the op-ed, but I think this is an ongoing topic that we all discuss. To me, the central component, whether it be of the op-ed or just call it that general idea, is around antitrust. Is it anti-competitive, right? Like, does Facebook, is it somehow preventing other companies from being competitive? And I can't say with any sort of legal sense that that's the case.
No, wait a minute.
The other issue is it doing damage to consumers? It isn't just anti-competitive. It doesn't have to be anti-competitive. The question is it doing damage to consumers? And that is something serious to consider.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm just sort of painting a broad picture of it. If you just take into account all of those components, I just don't have a strong opinion that breaking them up versus regulation would be the way to go on this, right? As far as, I would see it if you regulated them and then had any number of things that they would immediately be fined or in legal, I don't say legal jeopardy, I guess. I'm not sure what the term would be for it. Then those types of things I think would stop versus having them break the law or push privacy concerns or have PR problems. And then after the fact, almost sort of your classic ask for forgiveness versus ask for permission type of situation.
Let me ask you, have they done a good job self-regulating?
Oh, I don't think self-regulation is the way to go at all. I'm talking about somebody on the outside regulating them.
Well,
So
yeah.
I'm just saying.
But okay, so what would that? Who would regulate, and what form would that take, and what are the limitations? Like, I mean, this is the thing. The whole point of the breakup is that it could solve some of these issues, but who knows what it is? See, that's the thing. You just say quote regulation. I mean, that's a big if.
Well, I mean, there's lots to consider here, David. I mean, it's just like we've got this situation with, they're totally squashing competition. Okay, that's clear across the board. I mean, it's just like you can't just take it off the table and say it's about consumers. Because from a competitive standpoint, they copy anything that anybody does and they do it better and they can pretty much put you in the ground, or they buy you way before you're able to get to a level where you could get a serious return on your investment, serious money back in terms of that.
The same can be said of Google, by the way.
Well,
too.
yeah, and that's the point here. It's just like Facebook makes the lowest hanging fruit of three of the players which are in jeopardy right now in terms of regulation: Amazon, Google, Facebook, and Facebook's the easiest
It seems to me like the
tackle.
only people who know how to regulate them are in the EU. I don't think anyone in Washington, D.C. has too much of a clue about where to even begin with that.
Well, they sure know how to find them over in the EU.
And they have their attention because
they're
of that,
finding
because they're
here.
privacy
Wait a second.
violators.
Facebook is facing the largest FTC fine ever, somewhere between 3 and 5 billion, for the privacy violations that they just essentially incurred. And so they are going to be fining, and that's, as far as I understand, bigger than any EU fine. So we are capable of fining. That's possible.
And let's be honest here. When we're talking about fines, even when we're talking about $5 billion fines, that's what, like 7% of revenue. It's just like it's a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money to Facebook. And I'm wondering, how much.
But I will say this, and I'm quoting my my co-host of my other podcast that I do: if Facebook keeps doing this, violating privacy issues, they will get bigger fined. Period. That is definitely going to happen. There's no question.
Well, let me go back to the original question, though, which is breaking up Facebook. How does breaking up Facebook solve the problem, which is basically caused by I don't know, executive.
How would you break it into parts, even 2 or 3?
Well, you would break it into Instagram, WhatsApp. You break it into Facebook. You might even break out Messenger. It's just like you might break up all these different operating units and have them operate as separate companies. But all these companies are still ingrained with the Facebook culture that was playing fast and loose with data privacy. So, I'm not saying that breaking up is necessarily a bad thing, but I'm wondering what problem does it really solve in the end?
Because the problems that they have incurred with privacy violations have been working with third parties. So it's with Cambridge Analytica, and there was that case where they had this Facebook research VPN app for which they were reading teenagers' emails and paying them to be able to consume their content and use that data. So, and what was so amazing about that situation in particular was the fact that they had no sense that what they did was wrong. They published, the people who were working on it published something defending their right to do what they did, which seemed abhorrent to pretty much everyone else. And what I see is people who are in insane levels of success, which Facebook is, think they are above certain types of, rules that the rest of us sort of abide because people love their products so much and they're doing so damn well. You get into this mindset of we can do no wrong because everyone loves us. So let's just keep pushing.
I agree with you. And if you read the opinion piece that Nick Clegg wrote, matching Hughes's piece in the New York Times, he was arguing that it wasn't about size, but it's about the rights and interests of consumers and our ability to be accountable to governments and legislators. And he was kind of making the argument that he felt as though they were stepping up to the plate on that. But I think that is one of the reasons that Hughes and others have made this call for a breakup, is that they do not seem to be respecting that. So I recognize, you look at the AT&Ts of the world over the years and the breakup for a lot of reasons that were in the protection of consumers. They are not acting like it. They are not walking the talk. They're just talking it.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up the previous antitrust situations that have gone on in this country. I mean, the breakup of the railroads, breakup of AT&T. I mean, it was supposed to create a playing field where there'd be lots of competition, and it did work for a time, but eventually all those baby bells made their way back to the mother ship. I mean, it really didn't affect anything in the end. And then you have other situations like with Microsoft when they tried to unbundle Internet Explorer from the operating system. By the time they actually got that deal done, the technology wasn't nearly as dominant to begin with. So it was a waste of time. And I'm wondering, this whole call to break up Facebook seems like a great idea, and it seems like it's time to do something about them, but it doesn't seem that breaking up the band is actually going to affect anything. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's actually going to get the results that we want. And that only comes from regulation. Go ahead, Mark.
But Hughes even acknowledged that in his piece. I mean, he made a call for the breakup, but then he said even if that is not achievable, at the very least starting a conversation about some of the issues that he was raising that were behind his call for a breakup, as long as they are front and center. And it goes beyond fining, which is, to your point, a slap on the wrist from a financial standpoint, to actually dealing with some of the core issues around privacy, data privacy.
What do you think about the call? What do you think about the call for personal accountability by the CEO? I mean, we've talked about this on the show before. That's part of the proposals that have been going around Washington right now. About
this is something Elizabeth Warren put together, a bill saying that CEOs could actually face jail time if they were seen to maliciously allow for a breach or other behavior. So,
let me ask your opinion about that. Do you think that's something that's going to work? Do you think it's ever actually going to happen?
The reason for bringing that up is because we've had breaches in the past, like the most notoriously Equifax, and it seems that these executives get off free. Essentially, they get these golden parachutes, they quit, and yet make a lot of money. And the rest of us are the ones sort of suffering the consequences. And Equifax is the most notorious case because all of us were affected, whether we were customers or not. We are actually products of Equifax. And that's the same situation with Facebook. We are products of Facebook. We are not necessarily customers because some of us don't pay at all for Facebook, but we are users, and therefore we become the product of it. Equifax even worse because, whether you choose to or not, you become part of their darn database.
You talked earlier about how people love Facebook, though, and they don't see themselves as a product.
Well, they certainly don't. They don't understand.
In the case of Cambridge Analytica, when their data was stolen, and
that's privacy advocates. That's people on this call and people listening to this show.
A lot of people.
Okay, but wait a minute. All this is secondary to the fact that most people don't understand how many tendrils Facebook has in their lives, period. I mean, it's, it goes people back to the old story.
That Equifax is gathering their credit data. That they know.
But nobody knows. Nobody knows. Yeah, most people don't know that Facebook owns Instagram. So most people don't know that Facebook owns WhatsApp, and they're trying to integrate all those platforms. Know that,
but truly, no one knew. This is the key thing. No one knew what Cambridge Analytica was doing. That's the key part. People do know that those companies are owned by them, but no one knew that. People did know or do know that Equifax collects their credit data. We did not know at all that Cambridge Analytica was doing what it was doing. That is really, really critical, and that's really, really bad.
I want to shift the conversation here a little bit, Eli. I want to talk a little bit about what this means for advertisers, but because it's just like, is losing access to a single multi-network contributing social graph worth the pain to advertisers if it builds toward greater consumer trust? I mean, I know that you said you're pretty much against the breakup as being kind of useless. I mean, I'm maybe putting words in your mouth, but that's what I'm gathering. But, it's just like, is it worth breaking up this amazing resource to advertisers if it builds trust with consumers in the end?
I think that ideally speaking, from an advertiser perspective, having less places to have to go and worry about, it would be better. That said,
But
if
Facebook is considered to be the essential advertising product right now. I mean, that's where everybody wants to be. And it doesn't seem like that's really the case. It's
And the
not
same
just
can be
another
said of
place.
Google.
Yeah, between Google and Facebook, they dominate most of the ad sales. So losing that just makes our lives more complicated. It
but
means
to
we
me,
have.
it dominates because it works, right? Like companies would not spend money if it did not actually drive the results that they want. So to me, Facebook being broken up, not being broken up, like in the end, it would just come down to, is that more or less effective in some capacity that would be measured and tested and whatnot. And I feel very comfortable that the people that spend the money, the brands and agencies themselves, would find a way to be able to make it work. Is it less effective or more effective? So to me, it's, I'm not overly concerned again about it being single source and whatnot. It would just come down to the measurement of how it impacts that end game.
Does anybody else agree or disagree with that? Because it seems to me that if you break this amazing ad resource up, it becomes less valuable, but you get the benefit of having created this positive goodwill with consumers as a result of this. So it makes advertising look better, and we're respecting privacy.
I don't know how that's going to play.
Well, I know this is out there thinking, but I just want to know your thoughts on that. Do we get any benefit? Do we get any bump? Do we get any lift and advantage because we're suddenly more concerned about consumer privacy?
That's a really kind of a deep rabbit hole. What I was trying to say earlier is there are millions of people in the world that don't care about these particular issues. They care about cat videos and stuff. So no, you wouldn't win with them, right? Because they wouldn't know or care.
And even deeper than that, I would feel as though there might be a win if you see all of those various consumer-facing, audience-facing apps creating data that was interconnected and being actively shared with advertisers. But that's not the case. So ultimately, I don't think the breakup of Facebook is going to have much of an effect, if anything, on advertising, other than it might actually stimulate some of those individual apps to be more intercompetitive and more independent and seek more of the ad dollar from advertisers. So ultimately, I think, if anything, there might be some benefit from a cost standpoint. Ultimately, I think the true benefit is only going to come if it actually accelerates competition in the marketplace. If you see some new technology come into the marketplace that's an attempt to compete more directly with some of the individual business units that would be created as a breakup of Facebook.
Well, I'm going to move on, and we're going to talk next about influencer terminology and whether or not using the word influencer marketing really means what we think it means all the time, and whether or not that's important. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, I want to talk about our sponsor for this evening, because every year, just around the end of summer, just around that August timeframe, August, September, all the big names in marketing, all of them, everybody who comes on this show, it seems like, many of them past guests right here on this program, have only one conference on their lips, and that's Content Marketing World. We're talking about people like Scott Monty, Ann Handley, Kate O'Neill, so many of our famous people who have been coming on the show, authors, speakers, influencers, they're all going to be there. And that's why it was kind of surprising to me when I learned from the CM World people that so few agency folks have heard about this. I mean, nearly every major brand globally won't even think about missing this event, yet agencies don't attend it. And so Content Marketing World is trying to reach out to you to let you know what it's all about. Content Marketing World is the world's original and largest annual gathering of content marketing professionals. Over 4,000 attendees are expected this year. Now, if you've been to conferences, you know when you get in the 4,000 range, this is a serious, serious event. And they're all coming to hear the latest thinking on every topic imaginable about content marketing. For instance, I mentioned Kate O'Neill would be there. And well, she's going to be giving a talk based on her book, The Tech Humanist. And this is a keynote you do not want to miss. She's basically laying out a complete roadmap for using technology to its fullest without sacrificing the common sense wisdom that can only come from a human touch. It's really fascinating stuff. The book is amazing. You should go get it. And the talk is even better because Kate is such a dynamic speaker. And the best part about all this stuff for my agency listeners out there is that CM World is rolling out lots of great networking and learning opportunities that are specifically focused on you. I mean, they're adding a whole agency track of sessions to explore, a branded content track, even an agency exclusive cocktail hour just for you guys. Plus, and this is a really important one for you new business people out there, there's literally hundreds of new business prospects roaming the convention hall. And like I said, not a lot of agencies showing up. Sounds like a good opportunity for you to go out there and do some new business and try to get a few names and contacts. Now, there really isn't any good excuse for you not to send at least one member of your staff. September 3rd through the 6th are the dates. Cleveland, Ohio is the place. Don't wait because early bird pricing ends May 31st. I want you to register today at contentmarketingworld.com. Use the offer code BeanCast, and they'll even knock off $100 off when you use that code. So that's contentmarketingworld.com, offer code BeanCast. Register today, get your early bird discount, get the $100 off, and I'll be looking for you at this year's event. Well, there was an interesting blog post from Scott Guthrie this past week that takes on the misuse of the term influencer. Now, anybody who listens to this show will know that I have often railed about distinguishing between influencers and endorsers. They are not the same thing. They are completely different strategies. But Scott takes it a step further, highlighting the opposing forces in this space of PR-centered tactics versus a media buying mindset. David, take us through this a little bit. What's the difference and why does it matter how we define influencer marketing? What's that difference between a PR focus versus a media buying mindset?
You're asking me about influencer marketing, Bob? Great question. Difficult question, actually, because influencers and endorsers sound very similar, don't they? I think they sound similar, but I understand where you're going with this. And influencer marketing, of course, just like marketing in general, is an umbrella area, and lots of things happen underneath that umbrella. And that's where the Scott Guthrie expert kind of goes with his arguments, as he says, don't confuse all the things that fall under influencer marketing, including influencer advertising, which would be more of the paid model. From agencies, but also influencer relations, affiliate marketing, advocacy, all these things coming under the umbrella. So I think that's the distinction that makes sense to me. And so, back to sort of the question around what do people think influencers are, or they think about celebrities, and that's the tabloid version and the paid advertising version of influencer marketing. So, we could talk about whether that's a good idea and whether it works and pays back. A lot of people believe it is. I, want to just add here that I'm not against it. I'm not a huge fan. I tend to go down a path where I say to myself, everyone is an influencer. And so where that takes me is trying to build out brand community, which to me seems more important than having a couple celebrities or celebrities in their world spreading social media messages for me.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
What I have noticed on this show, Bob,
yes.
I've been on a bunch of times, is often that we will have
someone's moving their microphone. If you could stop doing that. Thank you. Go ahead, David.
Often we will have a topic discussing semantics of native advertising, semantics of custom publishing versus content marketing versus brand journalism, and the definition of this, and then we sit there and we argue about the definition of it. I will just say, what it all comes down to is the ethics of your brand and what message you want to get out there and how you want to use it. You can use all of these things extremely ethically, and you can also use it extremely unethically. and use unethical players too, and not disclose stuff, and also use stuff that is considered as advertising or as endorsement or whatever it is. Define it the way you want, but what it all boils down to is what is the brand you're putting out there, and what is the editorial requirements you have set for your own brand. Everyone's going to define
But
these
I
things.
don't
Just the way
necessarily.
it is.
I'm not entirely in agreement here because there's a distinct difference between PR tactics versus media buying mindset. When you have a PR hear me out.
I'm in agreement there. That's getting into a whole level of other issues, but we're dealing with semantics of naming things too. And that's what a lot of this article had to do, was the semantics of it. And I agree. There is a huge difference.
But the semantics matter because we're calling it all influencer marketing when influencer marketing should be about finding an influencer, convincing them that we have a good product, making them an advocate, and getting them to share. Whether or not we're sharing any free product or endorsement money or whatever, it's just like that's beside the point. It's relationship building. But when you're talking about media buying, you're basically saying
pause right there. You just created your own definition of it. There are other definitions of what you just described. There are. Believe it or not, there are. There are different definitions.
Well,
and I'd like to find a more genuine connection between people, whether they're famous or not, and the product. So whether it's on television or on Twitter, doesn't matter to me. Does the celebrity or influencer who carries weight, do they actually care about this company, or is this just a payday? Because
again, another definition of it. So this is the whole point I'm trying to point out, is that everyone's got a different opinion and definition of it.
What's yours?
It doesn't matter what mine is. That's the thing.
We're having a conversation. You can tell us.
I just hold on to my own ethics. Look, I own a media property myself, and I have ethics on how I operate my own media property. And I disclose on my site how that's done, and everything I do is disclosure. If anyone wants to question it, that's fine. But I disclose. It doesn't matter how I define any of this stuff.
So you're mad because brands don't disclose. You're upset about disclosure.
Okay, someone's moving their microphone again. I don't know who's doing it, but we got to keep careful with that. For me though, David, and it's what it comes down to, both Davids. I'm speaking to both of you now. I understand that it really doesn't matter in the end what you're calling it. It's just like, but it does matter that you understand that there's different tactics within this, and that it's just like that
Correct. And I agree with all of that. Yes.
But using the one word influencer marketing means so many different things to so many people that we do need better terminology in order to adequately communicate what exactly we're trying to achieve. Because when we're going in with a PR-based strategy, it is totally based on relationships. And when we're going in with a media-based strategy, we're buying commodities, we're buying ads. And those are two different strategies. They're two different things. They are not the same influencer marketing, whatever,
Yeah, and I like the long path that the PR teams take that you're discussing right there, because if you're going to make ads, we've all seen these celebrity endorsement ads. They're not exactly great ads. Do they convince a lot of people? I guess maybe. But if I'm going to make ads, I want to focus on the brand story and how it might connect to people, but not necessarily that story. So that takes me back to, well, how would I use those people then? And then in the PR framework, that makes sense. I want to leverage long term. These people drive my car. They drink my wine. Let's do a long play with them over 5 years where they're at our events. They're talking about us on television, casually, not just in a commercial.
And I think
David, hold on a second. Let Mark speak. Sure. Mark?
I was just going to say, and some of what you're talking there, I think is important because that lends itself to authenticity. If you've got someone who's advocating on behalf of you, paid or unpaid, over a period of time, presumably they are not just there for the money. There is a connection, and whoever is the audience is going to see through it. I think the most important thing that we haven't really talked about is what is the end game here? What is the objective of all of this activity, whether we have different descriptions of what these are or not? In our world, it's about engagement. So, we believe that whatever behavior you're looking for, transactional or otherwise, always starts with engagement. How do you feel or want to feel about a brand? What do you believe or want to believe about the brand? And how are those feelings and beliefs actually driving your behaviors? And I think those are ultimately the metrics that need to be at the forefront of however you are deciding on a strategy around influencer or PR-based advertising and advocacy to ultimately move the needle in the relationship that you have with your customers. How are you building engagement, and how is that engagement manifesting itself in some kind of behavior that is both meaningful to you as a business and is meaningful to the consumer who's actually leaning into your brand? It's more about how do you turn a push strategy into a pull strategy that helps everybody.
Well said.
I
Yeah.
will say that
Go ahead,
when
David.
companies approach me and they want to sponsor, they will ask a series of questions of, will I do this? Will I do that? And we go through that conversation. The reason we go through that conversation is because they have to ask this of every single influencer. Every single influencer that they communicate with has a different policy of what they will and will not do for and for not money, and what level they'll associate themselves or not associate themselves with the product. And so therefore, you take 5 influencers, they're all going to have 5 different programs. It's just simple as that.
But the bigger thing to understand, though, David, in my opinion, is that because these are such different strategies, we need to employ both to be as effective as possible. Maybe not in equal parts, but we need to.
That's fine. It's just it's going to always change person to person. It just is.
Okay, but it's not going to change person to person. It's going to change brand to brand. It needs the brands need to understand that endorsement.
Brand to brand, it change person to person. I mean,
you're not listening to me. The brand, the brand advertising. Via the influencers, basically media buying endorsements, affects certain parts of the market really, really well, but doesn't get other parts of the market, which is what influencer marketing, true relationship building is all about. It's blending, it's understanding that influencer marketing is not just going window shopping for the people with the biggest follower counts and to go out and to do a deal with them. I mean, it's also about doing hard work, PR, relationship building. I mean, Eli, what's your take on that? I mean,
I agree with all of that. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, listen, putting aside even from a business sense, just on a personal sense, I absolutely love like true PR marketing. Right?
Yeah.
Because I think of the things in my life that I evangelize because I love them. Nobody pays me. Right. But I definitely like, you guys have got to look at this car, or you have to use this product, or whatever it's going to be. And if I could really sense that authenticity, that's the type of thing that certainly let's say resonates with me as a consumer. So if that's possible, like I would love to see that. But in the end, I mean, going back to even my Facebook answer earlier, like I'm a big believer in paid media. Right. So if it works.
I was gonna say that I was watching TV recently. It was one of the award shows, and on the red carpet they asked Matthew McConaughey if he actually drove a Lincoln, and without dropping a beat, he said, "I have 3 in my garage." And I don't know if that was rehearsed. I don't know if that was practiced, but it got into my head, and I believed him, and I believe him now.
Right, and that's the value of marrying a PR strategy with a media buy strategy, and I think that's where a lot of people that are doing influencer marketing or thinking that they're doing influencer marketing are not fully embracing the medium and getting all the value out of it that they can. Well, I want to talk next about addressable TV. Addressable TV was big in the news this week in the wake of the new fronts. Yes, the new fronts are still going on these days. And as we expected, the big pitch was on the value of first-party platform data for targeting. All these different networks and different video server places are starting to tout the fact that they have a lot of first-party data to share. And still, after all these great presentations, advertisers remain skeptical of addressable as a total replacement for linear advertising, seeing it more as an effective add-on to their more linear-based buys. So David Spark, what continues to hold addressable back, and what will it take to tip the balance toward the inevitable rise of the connected TV and the addressable ad?
Well, I think addressable is doing fine for its position in the marketplace. I think the problem that it has, which it's I don't even think trying to fill, is with linear advertising's ability to, and again, not all, but it has the ability to get mass audiences, which is kind of not the point of addressable media, or it's not the way it's purchased. I would say it that way. I guess you could do it with addressable, but what would be the point? I guess
maybe that's the resistance. I mean, it's just like, yeah, people are using addressable ads. I mean, that it's catching on, but it's still not. I mean, it's still basically a drop in the bucket compared to what's going on with linear advertising when it comes to video. No, but it's important to.
You're talking about years of understanding how linear advertising works versus a new marketplace that's trying to upend that, and people are having a hard time coming around.
It's all about paradigm change, right?
Yeah, I mean, it takes time, but honestly, everyone's going to have to come around because people are cutting the cord left and right and on traditional media and are becoming more and more segmented over time, as we all know. This is not new news. And addressable media, which is essentially selling off of data rather than just programs, is designed to nicheify what has not been a nicheified market.
Well, we're looking at a future. We're looking at a future where everything's going to be this. We're talking about a future where streaming is the future for everything, that there will be no real linear programming except for live events at this point. So given that future, you've got to embrace this at some point and start moving all of your ads over there. And it seems like from what you've just said, David, the concern is, how do I continue to get my reach and frequency when I'm moving over to a digital platform with the targeting?
You get way more frequency than you get reach. I mean, that's what they realize. And as anyone who is sort of consuming, one of these services like a YouTube TV, you've been inundated with the exact same ad over and over and over again because there aren't enough advertisers playing in this space yet. And I think, honest to God, I've seen the same State Farm ad playing in front of Stephen Colbert's show. I don't know how many times, and it's just like, oh God, this ad again and again and again, and I think it's having a detrimental effect.
Well, they're addressing that. I mean, it's just like that. That is a big problem with the streaming industry, is the repetitive ads that keep coming out way too frequently.
Well, there's just not enough inventory rotating. I mean, unlike regular television.
Well, no, the problem is they have too much cheap inventory, and we have a lot of ads that are running too many times to fill up this space. So that's the big problem. They've got plenty of inventory. Eli, what's your take on that? I mean, it's just like, this is getting dangerously close to what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, right? From my perspective, living in like the measurement and research world, one of the biggest problems that we have, or our clients have, is it's about people and not about devices, right? Like in the end, like I saw a very interesting presentation at a conference, I think it was by the CMO of Hershey's recently. And he just said at this point, and I felt like he was being very innovative about this for an old company like they are, which was, he's like, I don't care what screen it's on as long as I'm reaching the people. It's just collective time. And problem is, though, if you think about exactly as David was mentioning about scale, is you don't know if you're hitting the same people too many times, if you're hitting too few people too few times, and so on and so forth, because there is no great way to be able to connect the dots across all those different devices. So if you were going back to the original question about what's holding it back, I feel like that's one of the big things. You have like a lot of that legacy dogma, which is the classic scale argument of television, which I certainly do appreciate because I certainly watch a lot of TV. But until we find a better way to be able to connect the dots across all the different ways that you're consuming the content, and then instead the ads that go along with it, addressable TV feels like it's going to be much slower to adopt.
Is it possible to consider that maybe addressable TV's big problem is that it's trying to sell the targetability just a little too much? I mean, because it's just like ad buyers are wanting the fast and easy replacement to the GRP, the gross rating point. They want to know how many eyeballs are seeing my ad and whether or not I'm getting the reach and frequency that I need to affect my bottom line. So is the fact that it's so addressable just causing more problems than it's solving, and maybe it should just be an under the hood thing and be more focused on the that GRP type approach?
I think this is what people have wanted for a long time. I just think they're having a hard time, shifting over. I just, who was the one who said it, talking about just sort of paradigm change? I think that's the issue. I just think it's a matter of time and a matter of usability. I would throw that out as a key factor. If they don't make this an easy buy, then you've got trouble.
Mark, you wanted to weigh in? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was the one who talked about paradigm shifting. And, we've already used the term reach and frequency a few times here, and not some newer terms like effective cost per thousands. And this idea, on the surface of things, addressable TV is 4 times more expensive than linear TV. Once you look at how much of your linear TV buy is pure waste, I think you can start to be comparing apples to apples. But in my experience, not enough media companies are going to that depth of math to understand the efficiency and the effectiveness of the ad buys against the specific target audience, and target audience deeper than demographics. I mean, one of the things I counsel clients whenever I'm meeting them for the first time and they start defining their audience by demographics, is I say that is the least interesting piece of information for me to help me understand how to connect your brand to them. That is a way that media companies buy media and can measure media, but that is not how you need to understand your audience. So I would argue that another challenge for addressable TV is going beyond what they're doing now, which is more behavioral based. It's good to know that somebody's in the market for buying a car, so therefore I should serve them a car. But it would be great to understand their attitudes towards certain car brands, so that, again, I'm not wasting my Volvo ad dollars firing up a Volvo ad to somebody who has no interest in buying a Volvo. I think when they get to that level of granularity of understanding the specific viewer and their attitudes as well as their behaviors, then I think you've got a gold mine.
Right, and how are you going to do that without violating privacy?
Well, and that goes full circle.
Great point.
Goes full circle, just like David said, right back to the original topic, which is basically to have this multi-platform opportunity to see into a customer's life and understand that they're searching on Google for a car right now, and they're talking about cars on Facebook, and they're actively looking and dwelling on ads about cars on their web pages, and they're going to watch, I don't know, it's just like they're watching a TV show that's going to be very similar to the product that there's trying to be sold, and suddenly you're getting a car ad. I mean, that's what we need to be working toward in terms of making this a more valuable platform for advertisers, but it also creates all kinds of privacy issues that make it untenable. So, I mean, Eli, help me out here. It's just like, is it worth pursuing this dream of total insight into the consumer, or is this just a wasted effort because it's going to be legislated out of existence before it even gets started?
I think it's absolutely worth the effort, right? I think in the end, even if you go back to, old school Nielsen and things of that nature, you don't necessarily need to have an enormous sample in order to determine if something works, right? When it comes to like measurement and feedback. Now, we live in a world of census data, and that's certainly, my jam, if you will. And, so again, that's why I certainly exist in that camp. But I'll just say that there's no reason that we should be shutting it down. It just comes down to, do we have the right measurement to be able to say how well it works versus the classic way, right? Until that happens, money shifts when you could prove that it actually works, right? We've known that, and I think it was David Sparks, I believe, who had mentioned when you talk about television, the way that we've always thought about that, that when people understand that, they buy into that, it works, the economics of it, et cetera, is until we have like the economic language to be able to talk about it, it's just going to be limited.
Well, I'm going to move on to our final topic because we're running a little late on time. Once upon a time, corporate accelerator programs were all the rage. The company paid minimal investment, the startup got advice, support, resources, and everyone got a benefit out of it. But now we see that the programs are less about building businesses, actual functioning independent businesses, as much as about generating ideas and new IP that benefit the corporation more than their startup classes. I've heard a lot of skepticism about the corporate accelerator over the last couple of years, and I think it might be coming to a head. Mark, is the corporate accelerator model really a scam? And if so, is that necessarily a bad thing?
I love the harsh way you kind of framed the question. Is it a scam? And is that a bad thing to be a scam?
Well, it's fair though when you think about it, because it's just like it's kind of a scam to say we're going to create a whole bunch of startups that are going to give you, the company, all kinds of great ideas, and then screw them. They're gone. We'll keep the IP, and it's just that seems like a really great strategy if you can get it to work.
Well, that's true, and I do a lot of work in a space with companies who are bringing new ideas to market. A lot of work in the innovation space. So I actually happen to have a couple of clients right now, one in the financial services and one in the energy space, who have created, not bought into or created an accelerator with a number of external startups, but have created their own internal startup under the same guise of let's take a bunch of people who are separate from the mothership. Let's give them some money. Let's give them a wayfinding device of some sort and some direction, and go and find some new innovation for this company. In one case, it's actually about trying to disrupt the current business that they are in, and in another one, it's an attempt to kind of extend the brand into some other categories. And so I don't have a lot of experience working with clients who have been involved in a pool of external startups, but I think. From what I have one client who's in that space, and from the conversations I've had with them, there's certainly a need for both parties to understand why are they getting into this, and and make sure that there's an alignment of goals. So one of the things that you're just talking about there, is it a scam? I think it could be perceived as a scam if there's a misalignment of goals. If the company is saying, I want to invest in a bunch of startups and give them some resourcing and maybe some mentorship, and I want them to try and solve a specific business problem that I can't seem to solve internally. And some of those startups are coming into it for a different reason. Maybe they've got a great idea and they just need a customer base to be able to prove out the model. So I think, number one, you need to make sure that there's an alignment of goals. And if there is, that's lessening the ability for either party to feel, or certainly the startups to feel, as though it's a scam. I think it's also important for the company as a whole to get buy-in from various business units that are going to be affected from whatever the startup is going to bring to the corporation to be able to bring it to marketplace. If you've got one champion within the company who's been given this mantle, and that is the case that I have with one client, and you don't have other business units around them that are open to participating and help those startups bring an idea to market in a meaningful way, then I think you're setting yourself up for failure as well. So I think as long as you lay the ground rules and both parties understand what they're attempting to get out of the exercise, I think you can lay a path towards success. And if you don't do that, there's definitely a perception that this could be a quote unquote scam.
So I personally have not heard the scam argument before. But it is very clear that being a startup inside a corporation is a different egg than it is if you are completely independent working with an incubator that is not part of a larger corporation. But there is obviously value to being with a larger corporation. You get access to existing customers. You get access to all their partner network. You get access to essentially all the assets that the company has in general. But unlike a startup, which does not need to prove a sort of a bottom line right away that they can, cruise on by, given their investment on sort of developing their innovation, whatever it is, if you're within an accelerator within a company and they they are giving you a certain amount of time to sort of develop what it is you need to develop, then it's a good situation. But you're probably locked to a partnership agreement with the company, which is, again, could be a good situation or a bad situation.
So what it really
Depending
comes down
on
to
where
is
you develop your technology.
what it comes down to is whether or not you've negotiated well. In other words, it's just like there's a lot of pitfalls in the corporate model, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It comes down to how astute are you about those pitfalls, and
it's more than just negotiating contract. That's like kind of a given. I literally just last week came from a conference called the IRI Annual, which is a conference all about innovation. And I had this very discussion with one gentleman who is there who talks about that it is difficult to operate within a corporation. But like I said, there's a lot of value there. But one of the things that everybody also said is even before you get these contracts in place, you have to trust people. So if you believe that this could be a scam, obviously you don't trust the person, so you shouldn't do it. It just gets down to that. You just shouldn't do anything if you don't trust them. If you believe they're pulling a scam, get out.
I was going to say,
because you've got to base it on trust.
What is the host? What is the host corporation's purpose for doing it, and what is their skin in the game? What are they looking for? You probably know, Bob, but Wieden & Kennedy has Pi down in the basement, or I think they moved them out of the building now, but Pi being Portland Incubator Experiment. And my read on all that was that it's successful because Wieden & Kennedy just wanted creative things to happen in their basement.
Well, I would say, I think different startups need different things. And so I think a startup in an incubator is really about helping startups walk. And I think an accelerator helps them run faster. So I also think you need to, as a startup, understand at what point are you in the process of bringing your idea forward. And are you someone who needs some help in learning still how to walk and maybe some training wheels? Or are you in a phase where you are walking and now you want to start to run? And there is a great partner that you could provide some equity in return for all kinds of resources and funding in order for them to help you run faster.
And that's a really good point, that incubators and accelerators are not the same thing. And sometimes maybe a corporate environment might be a really great place to incubate your idea, and other times it might be a great place to accelerate your idea. It just really depends upon the idea itself and the company and what kind of symbiosis you can kind of negotiate into the agreement.
Absolutely. To me, it's not just about negotiation. It's about making sure that you have alignment of goals. That's the first and most important starting point.
But also note that the companies are doing this because they must innovate, or they can someone can innovate them out of existence. And companies do this often for survival. There's a book that's very well known in the industry of innovators, known as The Innovator's Dilemma. And the idea being that if you do not disrupt yourself, one of your competitors or someone you don't even know who could be your competitor could disrupt you. And we have seen this countless times happen in the past. So companies do this, and this is they do it themselves internally. They have their own innovation groups, or they create these incubator or accelerator situation, depending on the stage they're in, to sort of accelerate the innovation within their own organization.
Yeah, and the larger that you become, the less agile you become. I do think Wieden & Kennedy got into the game because they'd had some painful experiences not being maybe as digitally advanced as Nike and others wanted them to be. And so they were doing everything that they could to learn. And so I really think they got into it for the right reasons. They did learn. They did spawn off a bunch of startups that, are legitimate businesses now. So it's a good case example.
Well, with that, it's time for the Ad Fail 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with David Byrne. You can find him at bonehook.com. That's the website for his consultancy. Tell us what's going on in I forgot adpulp.com as well. So tell us, David, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote?
Thanks so much, Bob. So yes, Ad Pulp's been rolling along strong. We're in year 15 now, so please check it out. Been trying to write once a day or once every other day. With Bonehook, changed the business model a bit. We're much more brand strategy focused right now. So it's about the inputs that will impact your messaging versus the outputs where we used to be. And just a lot of that had to do with, I don't want to compete in that world. I want to take the higher value path to strategy, and that's what we've been doing. So that's been a repositioning of the firm over the last year.
Oh, that sounds great. Yeah, definitely. And definitely check out Ad Pulp. It's a great site to get your latest news from. It's also a great site for some fantastic advertising opinion. And Bonehook is just phenomenal. So check them all out. Next up, Eli Goodman. You can find him. It's jumpshot.com, right? That's the home.
That is the right website, Bob.
Which it's just like I'm always suspect of really, really cool URLs that, seem like they shouldn't be yours, but you actually have Jumpshot. That's pretty cool. So tell us what's going on.
It's just an asset from many years ago. And in fact, it's good that we're calling it Jumpshot now, because when we first started this a few years ago, people would always say jumpsuit or jumpstart. Jumpsuit was my favorite, that I was working at a jumpsuit company. But anyway, just to get to it, for anybody that's not familiar, Jumpshot, we're a marketing analytics and quantitative research firm. We have a panel of 100 million users worldwide, spread out in 188 different countries, and it's the full click stream on mobile and web browser for those people. Every website they visit, search term they use, product they buy, video they watch. And we mix and match and weave all that data together. And I always like to say I have the bricks and I help companies build cathedrals. So in the end, if you need any type of data on pretty much any type of online behavior of any kind, we're your guys.
And it's worth getting in touch with them just to meet Eli, because Eli is a phenomenal human being. So definitely give us a call, give him a call and find out a little bit more about what they're doing.
Thanks. Bob called my wife real quick before this just to get a quick plug on how cool I am.
Next up, David Spark. You can find him at sparkmediasolutions.com. That's the home of Spark Media Solutions, which is a great content marketing operation. Tell us about what you're doing, David. What would you like to promote?
Actually, I would like to promote my media channel, which is the CISO series. That's spelled CISO, stands for Chief Information Security Officer. And for any listeners who are in the cybersecurity space, doing cybersecurity marketing, for that matter, this has kind of been a pretty popular channel for just that. And as a result, we have 2 podcasts on our channel, one called the CISO Security Vendor Relationship Podcast, another one called Defense in Depth. And they've become popular, and we're doing live recordings of them. I got one coming up this week. We're doing the closing keynote at Avanta's, that's owned by Gartner, CISO Executive Summit. And we got another one coming up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I'm inking deals on a couple more coming up. And so check it out at CISOseries.com.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And do go to Spark Media Solutions and see the kind of work that he does on a day-to-day basis, because it's some really amazing content, some really great videos.
Thank you.
And he does great work. Last but not least, Mark Whitehead. You can find him at cultideas.com. That's the home of Cult Collective, where he is the managing director and also the chief engagement officer. So tell us what's going on in your world, Mark. What would you like to promote?
Well, I don't want to take anything away from the conference that you were plugging earlier, the Content Marketing Conference. So the second most important conference that I think you should have on your list is a little event we hold up in Banff, Alberta every February called The Gathering. So if you go to cultgathering.com, you can learn more about it. We bring about 1,200 people from around the world who are all typically in the marketing space, but they really gather to share stories and celebrate brands who built a cult-like following, which is what we are all about, helping the brands do that. And every year we have honorees for brands who have done that, and the senior leadership of those brands come and speak with the team. So in 2019, this past February, we had Yeti and Marvel and the LA Lakers and Lush and Cheetos and North Face and a few others that were all there. And we also introduced for the first time a personal cult brand, and that was Tony Hawk. And Tony came and spoke to the crowd about all the work that he's done over the years, beyond his skateboarding success into his personal brand and his charitable commitments and things like that. So it's a really great and a very different kind of a conference than any business conference that I've certainly attended in my decades in the business. And I would encourage people to check out cultgathering.com to learn more.
Yeah, the gathering is such a really cool event. I kind of liken it to the wintertime can. It's this opportunity to go skiing.
We do as well.
It's like going to skiing and rubbing elbows with every single one of the major brands from around the world. It's such a really cool event. So check that out. As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, Uber went public this week. So did the drivers, who organized a strike over low wages on the exact same day. And then, David, they added let's figure this out. The wage strike, the billions the company has already lost without any profitability date in sight, it's all resulted in the stock closing like 7% below its IPO price. David Spark, what's going on here? What's the deal with Uber? Are they in trouble?
No, I don't think Uber's in trouble at all. But I think this strike by Uber was, and also Lyft drivers, actually both of them went on strike, was a dangerous thing for them to do, because it was kind of a do or die. And I'm quoting my co-host, who is the former chief information security officer of Lyft. If they were to successfully pull off the strike, which they really didn't, then they would be seen to have collective bargaining. And how they would have been able to pull that off, I don't know how, because my wife was actually concerned about being able to take a Lyft or an Uber. And then I quickly opened the app and I showed her, look, there's 6 cars right near us on the day of the quote strike. So it didn't really do anything. And honestly, when you come right down to it, they're now in a serious problem, the drivers, because now they know that the companies realize they have no collective bargaining power.
I was going to say the drivers went public a long time ago. I always ask when I'm riding, do you drive for both services? And they always say, yes, I drive for Lyft and it's better. Don't call Uber.
Yeah, the drivers seem to like Lyft better than Uber, but that's beside the point. Uber still has the dominant position. Well,
with all their bad press, I still don't understand it either.
Yeah, I know. Well, next up, Ever is a service that marketed itself as free cloud storage for photos. But apparently, Eli, they were also secretly leveraging these photos to educate their facial recognition software, which they were selling to all kinds of players. So basically, that free turned out to be not so free as it usually does.
Yeah, I mean, listen, to me, and to go back to the privacy discussion from earlier, is GDPR compliancy, right? Which is definitely like a very strong way to be able to consider thinking about how things are going to be in the future in the United States and beyond. One of the core tenets of that is that the purpose of the app has to be that we are using, the reason you use the app is the reason that this app exists and the reason that we track this information. And, for them to be able to cross like that, I mean, that's a bad look, to use the parlance of our times, if you will. But in the end, also, I just believe to be generally unethical, right? It's just one of those things. You have got to be upfront about it. In the article that you had shared and we read through it, I mean, their CEO was like, oh, we were upfront. It didn't seem to be very clear to the end user.
Right. They were clear, but not clear enough. And I think that's
not clear enough.
That's the
Bob,
key
do you think
here.
having a beard protects me from this?
A beard does not protect you from anything.
Damn it.
Now, next up, influencer, the word influencer, has just been added to the latest edition of Merriam-Webster's English Dictionary. Oh, Mark. So we're pretty much to blame for this, right?
I would say so. I mean, it'll be interesting. I haven't read the definition. I'm curious to know, because I think one of the comments earlier that David was saying was there's so many definitions for influencers. So now I'm curious to know how Merriam-Webster has decided to define it.
That's true. I haven't thought about that.
They tie
I
it to social media, interestingly. So it's about people who can promote a product or service on
Specifically in social
media.
media. Wow.
Mhm.
Well, that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Mhm.
Well, CVS Pharmacy took the Quit Big Tobacco pledge, which includes working only with vendors who also take this pledge. However, while it's easy to find agencies that are tobacco free, it's nearly impossible, David Byrne, to find a holding company that is. Good
How
luck
did
with
I
that,
know
people.
that you were going to ask me this one? I'm the one person on the panel who has worked for Big Tobacco. Yes, I've done it. So good question. And I usually go to Big Sugar and all these other places where there are violations all over the place, but we don't seem to worry too much about that. The one thing I will say about tobacco, just like alcohol, people know what they're doing when they drink and smoke. No one's forcing it on them. So this is a murky area.
And last but not least, vibrator maker VibeEase launched a promotion for Mother's Day that seemed to suggest, Mark, that their Bluetooth-enabled vibrator would make a great Mother's Day gift. And just when you could almost forgive them by thinking that they're talking about the mother of your children, maybe your wife, instead they throw out the offer code, "Wow, your mom."
I think you need to comment on that, Bob, because I have no comment on that. That's terrible. That is terrible.
Oh my God, I can't believe this. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it, comment online, use the hashtag AdFail5. That's pound AdFail and the number 5. Well, that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C-Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
It's like, you know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.